Ever stop to think why some brands just, well, stick in your mind?
Yeah, like a song you can't get out of your head.
Exactly. A familiar logo can trigger this whole wave of feelings associations, often without us even really noticing.
And we're swimming in them, aren't we? Thousands of brand messages every single day, all fighting for attention.
So how does that actually work? Let's try and unpack the psychology behind it all, using the material you shared with us. We're going to explore how our minds really interact with brands.
Right, looking at everything from, how branding first started way back when to the modern challenges like building trust online, managing crises.
It's a fascinating area, and the resources provided give us a really solid starting point.
Our goal here is to really get to grips with the core psychological principles at play, how brands shape our perceptions, how they earn our trust.
Or sometimes lose it pretty spectacularly.
Exactly, and how they navigate, well, everything in today's complex world. We'll focus on pulling out the most compelling insights from these materials.
And those materials include Jonathan Gabay's brand psychology, which really gets into that connection between our thoughts and the brand world. So let's go way back for a second.
To the origins.
Yeah, it might surprise people that branding wasn't always about, catchy slogans or slick designs. Originally, it was pretty straightforward.
More practical.
Yeah, just a way to show this belongs to me.
Yeah.
Like literally a cattle brand.
Then, as railways expanded in the 1800s and products could travel further,
Ah, the distribution piece.
right, the focus shifted to this was made by me, a mark of the maker. And those early logos were mainly just for simple identification, nothing too fancy.
It's interesting how that basic need identifying ownership or origin has evolved, isn't it?
Yeah.
Think about the brand hashtag.
Yeah, Merriam-Webster added that in, 2014?
That's right. It's a modern way for a brand to say, this is us, but it also invites conversation interaction online.
It links everything together.
Exactly. And if you look at the bigger picture, it just underlines how crucial it is for brands to be, well, reliable,
Mhm.
authentic in everything they do. Doesn't matter if it's news, ads, social media, wherever they pop up.
That consistency and genuineness is key.
Absolutely. And the world they're popping up in has changed so much, especially recently. Think about the early 2000s, the recession's impact.
The sources mentioned that UC Berkeley psychologist Datcher Keltner, his studies showed a real dip in faith among 18 to 33-year-olds.
In traditional things, right, like marriage, voting, religion, even job security.
Yeah, a general erosion of trust in the established systems. And you also saw those figures from Britain around 2014 about the widening wealth gap.
That period of economic uncertainty definitely shook people's confidence.
It certainly did. And that shift, that lack of trust, it had a knock-on effect on how people viewed brands too. Where do you place your trust if the old pillar seems shaky?
Good question. And at the same time, our screens were getting smaller,
But the information flow is exploding. Information overload.
which led to consumers wanting much shorter, punchier brand stories. Get to the point.
They became, as the sources call it, Generation C, these self-organized communities curating their own interests, their own information streams.
Right. And think about the power of a quick visual on, say, Pinterest or even Vine back in the day.
Fleeting visuals, yeah. The expectation became that you could communicate a lot very, very quickly. It's all about grabbing that attention fast.
Which brings us neatly to how our brains actually cope with all this stimulus.
Because they're incredible pattern detecting machines, aren't they? Always have been.
Totally. From recognizing faces, friend or foe,
Mhm.
to seeing shapes in the stars, understanding language. We're constantly seeking meaning in patterns.
And branding really, at its core, taps right into that fundamental human drive.
How so?
Well, by creating familiar logos, consistent messages, clear identities, companies are basically setting up these recognizable patterns. Patterns our brains can latch onto easily and associate with certain qualities or feelings.
It connects directly to that core idea from Gabay's book you mentioned.
Yeah.
You are the product of your thoughts.
Precisely. It highlights how much our own psychology influences how we perceive and feel about brands. Their reputation isn't just about what they do, but how we think about them.
And the book seems aimed at quite a broad audience.
Yeah, marketing people, designers, business leaders, HR, psychology grads. Basically, anyone who needs to understand how brands build that reputation and, crucially, earn loyalty.
The structure sounds interesting too. The left lobe and right lobe idea.
The left lobe part delves into the history, society, trust, the more analytical side, while the right lobe looks at the personal side, like the challenges executives face, staying authentic under intense media scrutiny.
So that first part really tackles those foundational questions about how brands gain trust and seem genuine.
Exactly, how they establish that authenticity.
Okay, so we're, about 3 minutes into our conversation exploring brand psychology?
Seems about right.
We just want to take a quick moment and say hello and a special welcome to everyone tuning in via the Audiobook Quiver YouTube channel.
Yeah, great to have you with us as we unpack these ideas.
If you're finding this interesting and you want more engaging analyses and summaries like this stuff that helps you learn quickly and really get to grips with a topic, please do take a second to like this video.
And subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit that notification bell too, so you stay updated on future content.
Okay, back to it. Let's think about something really fundamental. Logos. McDonald's golden arches, maybe?
Perfect example. That illustrates what the book calls logo semiotics and the sequence of cognition.
It goes down a bit.
Sure. Logo semiotics is basically the study of what a logo means beyond just its shape, the ideas, the feelings it triggers. And the sequence of cognition is how our brain processes that visual step by step, leading to recognition and association.
So with McDonald's, it's so pervasive that even a tiny glimpse
Instantly triggers a whole set of associations. You know what it is, what it represents, almost subconsciously.
Right. And their brand story has so many layers, doesn't it? Service, restaurant atmosphere, even the uniforms.
Happy Meal toys. It's astonishing, but McDonald's is actually the world's biggest toy retailer because of Happy Meals.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah, selling over 1.5 billion toys a year. It shows how a brand can stretch far beyond its core product.
It really does. And another huge element in branding is color.
Oh, definitely. Your sources mentioned a 2006 study, Impact of Color on Marketing, found that sometimes up to 90% of quick buying decisions.
90%, just based on color.
Can be, yeah. In certain situations, it's a massive influence.
And there was another study, Exciting Red, Incompetent Blue, right, about how color directly affects our purchase intentions.
That's the one. Think about Apple's use of white. It communicates simplicity, clean design, accessibility.
So the big takeaway is brands need to pick colors carefully to match their personality.
Absolutely. It's not just aesthetics, it's psychological. There was even that French study in 2011.
One about tipping?
Yeah, Université de Bretagne Sud found male diners tipped waitresses in red T-shirts more often than those in other colors like black or green.
Huh. Makes you wonder why.
It does. And apparently even the yellow cover of the book we're drawing from wasn't random.
Really? What's the thinking there?
Well, yellow is often associated with acquiring knowledge, mental agility, perception. And it grabs attention, supposedly engages the fusiform gyrus in the brain.
Wow. It's all so interconnected.
It really is.
Yeah.
And moving beyond just the visual, there's the power of sheer familiarity.
The mere exposure effect.
And the familiarity liking effect, yeah. Basically, the more we see something, like a brand, the more we tend to like it, often without any solid reason. Just exposure breeds fondness.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
Like that old Scottish widow's slogan, life feels better when you have a plan.
Exactly. It taps into that need for reassurance, safety, routine. Psychologists find the more accustomed you are to a product, the stronger that brand relationship usually becomes.
But then there's this interesting paradox. Scarcity.
Right. Sometimes limiting availability makes something more desirable.
Like the Jack Daniels example from the mid-50s to mid-70s.
Precisely. They couldn't meet demand, but they kept advertising, which just fueled the desire for it even more.
And sales reps would actually, prescribe allocations.
Yeah. Strategically doling out the limited supply. Creates that sense of exclusivity, urgency.
The book also warns about being too familiar, right? The downside of routine.
That rather grim story about Jack Daniel himself, forgetting his safe combination because he did it so often by rote.
Kicked the safe in frustration and got an injury that ultimately killed him. Yikes.
A stark reminder that routine can sometimes lead to fatal errors. And there's the other example.
The Wicked Bible.
That's it. The 1631 King James Bible printing error, leaving out the not in thou shalt not commit adultery.
Another case of familiarity breeding oversight, I guess. Just overlooked a crucial word.
Easily done when you're too close to something.
Which kind of leads into how unreliable our memories can be, even vivid ones, and how that affects brand perception.
Absolutely. The sources mention George W. Bush's conflicting accounts of seeing the first plane hit on 9/11.
Likely the brain struggling to accurately process multiple, intense, simultaneous short-term memories.
Right. That seems to be the thinking. And research by Elizabeth Phelps at NYU on 9/11 memories backs this up.
How so?
She found that the vividness, the confidence people had in their memories, correlated with how close they were physically to the World Trade Center. Proximity seemed to enhance the subjective sense of accuracy.
Interesting. So brand messages aren't just visual or verbal then?
Not at all. They engage all senses: auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, gustatory, smell, taste, touch, sound.
And the word brand itself comes from Old Norse, brander, meaning to burn.
Right, linking back to those early cattle brands.
Mm.
And they even found early proto-branding puns on wine jars in Pompeii,
Huh. And logo is Greek, from logos.
all pointing to this long history of trying to make marks and associations. The book talks about transferable association.
Where a feeling gets linked from one thing to another.
Exactly. And the interjected brand article, or IBA, that's when a branded item becomes part of how someone sees themselves, part of their identity. Like someone who only drives a certain make of car because it projects the image they want.
Precisely. It's about creating a whole experience that resonates on multiple levels, tying into self-perception.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Political branding.
Ah, yes. Applying these same principles to politics,
Hmm.
from U.S. campaigns to the EU Parliament, trying to engage citizens.
Though, as the sources note, voter turnout for EU elections often stays pretty low despite those branding efforts.
Which raises big questions, doesn't it? How effective is branding when you're dealing with deep-seated beliefs or perhaps apathy? And the sources mention differing views on democracy, how marginalized groups might interpret symbols differently, sometimes taking them to extremes.
Yeah, and the vulnerability of democracy to soundbite policies or logocracy, where catchy slogans might replace substantial debate.
And when we make choices, political or otherwise, we tend to rationalize them, right? Find logical justifications.
The book mentions deductive reasoning, syllogisms. Even the example of changing the wording on the 2014 Scottish independence referendum ballot to avoid perceived bias.
It's all about framing, which leads to Professor Gary Becker's idea,
The simple model of rational crime, or SMORC.
based on him parking illegally.
Yeah. He figured often unethical decisions boil down to a simple cost-benefit analysis in our heads. Is the potential reward worth the risk of getting caught?
Which brings us to the digital world and the risks of overreach, like that Apple and U2 album giveaway.
Oh, that caused a stir, didn't it? Meant as a gift, but many people saw it as intrusive.
Raised privacy concerns, worries about Apple accessing accounts.
They even had to set up a special website just to help people remove the album. Shows how sensitive people are about their digital space.
Definitely. And just making punishments harsher doesn't always stop the thinking behind unethical acts, does it?
Probably not. The book uses that anecdote about the father offering to just swipe some pencils from work for his son. The underlying attitude isn't necessarily changed by the threat of punishment alone.
We've also seen this growing distrust in traditional institutions. That 2013 poll showing young UK adults distrusting religious faiths.
And the 2014 MIT report linking rising internet use in the U.S. with a significant drop in religious affiliation between 1990 and 2010.
The internet is clearly a huge influencer now, shaping beliefs, connections.
For sure. And unfortunately, dishonesty seems pretty widespread. The sources mention hospitals like Cedars-Sinai struggling to get staff to consistently wash their hands.
Even something as basic as that.
And that 2012 survey finding 1 in 5 job seekers admit to lying on their CV. Forbes even listed the common FIBS education job titles.
Plus the UK Science Museum poll saying men lie, 3 times a day on average, women twice.
The numbers are surprisingly high.
And this dishonesty has real costs. Insurance fraud in the UK, for example, adds a fair bit to everyone's premiums, according to that 2013 report.
Absolutely. And brands can suffer too. Netflix losing subscribers after that 2011 price hike and the whole Quickster mess.
Yeah.
They had to backtrack fast.
These things show how vital trust and meeting expectations are. And we're seeing more savvy consumers now, too.
The professional complainers, as the book calls them. People who know brands are sensitive about reputation and aren't afraid to complain, sometimes loudly.
Even if the complaint isn't entirely substantial.
Right. Poor opinions substituting for empty thoughts, as the source puts it.
Our social image seems tied up in brands, too. That funny online exchange about the kid's Porsche bike.
The pedalless Porsche versus a BMW. Yeah, it highlights how possessions can boost our social standing, or how we perceive they do.
And neurologically, cool products actually trigger the reward center in the brain. the nucleus accumbens.
They can, yeah. But that coolness factor often fades if the product stops enhancing our social image. Brodmann area 10 in the brain is involved in processing that social status link.
And our patience, definitely shrinking. That 2014 research, expectation reflex down from 10 days to 10 minutes,
We want everything now. Instant gratification.
probably linked to our smartphone dependence. That 2014 poll showing how reliant Americans felt on their phones.
Can't function without them, many said. It's changed everything.
Okay, so let's talk big data versus privacy, that paradox.
Right. A 2014 report found CFOs and CIOs struggling to actually use all the customer data they collect effectively.
And another index that year showed contradictory behavior, people sharing tons online.
While having really low trust in institutions to protect their privacy, the social sharing paradox.
It's a weird disconnect.
It is. And we have to remember, computers don't have morals. Trust in tech ultimately relies on the humans behind it. Users, designers, developers.
And data breaches feel almost normal now, don't they?
Depressingly so. As Bruce Schneier said, data control is a huge deal. We saw the Sony Pictures hack described by Kaz Hirai.
There's almost a desensitization to these stories, even as people work constantly on fixes, like for the Heartbleed bug.
Which is risky. That's why balancing the big quantitative data with qualitative individual responses is so crucial for avoiding reputational hits.
And security is a huge issue. That 2014 HP study showing how vulnerable Internet of Things devices were.
Toasters and fridges getting hacked led to responses from Google and Apple trying to reassure people.
But on the flip side, there's small data.
Yeah, a potential advantage for smaller, independent online brands allows for really niche, targeted marketing.
Using tools like Apple CarPlay, Google's Open Automotive Alliance. Lots of ways to reach specific groups.
And sometimes brands get really creative, even unconventional. That story about Iron Maiden.
Manipulating the deep web to connect with music pirates. Legendary, if true.
Quite the tactic. Contrast sharply with, say, Oreo's quick thinking during the Super Bowl blackout huge success versus Cadbury's less effective attempt during a London Underground strike.
Timing and relevance are everything in that real-time marketing game. Seems like the average big company doesn't post on Twitter that often anyway.
Right. And having a really clear sense of why you exist as a brand seems critical.
Like the Apple example again. Not just focusing on what their computers did, like the traditional players.
But why they did it. Challenging the status quo, focusing on user-friendliness, that distinct identity.
Transparency and participation are key too, especially for public services. That botched NHS England data scheme
Led to crisis talks with the British Medical Association. Highlighted the need not just for transparency, but for genuinely involving patients and the public in designing services.
As Ruth Thorby discussed with Tim Kelsey, it's about participation and transparency, though early YouTube reactions showed public skepticism.
Yeah, building trust takes more than just releasing data.
Ultimately, it's all about shaping perceptions, isn't it? Whether it's trusting a spokesperson or feeling secure in a digital space.
Absolutely. Which brings us to how whole industries adapt, like tobacco.
Right. France planning plain packaging with health warnings instead of brand names, potentially signaling the end for traditional cigarette marketing there.
And at the same time, big tobacco investing heavily in e-cigarettes.
A dual strategy. Wean smokers off traditional cigarettes while keeping market share with new products.
Seems like it. A world away from old ads targeting kids for brands like Chesterfield or Camel.
Hard to imagine now. And we're seeing restrictions on e-cig sales to under 18s.
And the BMA in the UK voting to push for a ban on cigarette sales to anyone born after 2000. Plus, e-cigs potentially becoming licensed medicines.
It's a massive shift in regulation and perception.
Definitely. The book also mentions disruptive branding using publicity statements rather than direct marketing and native advertising.
Where ads try to blend in with regular content, feel less intrusive.
Exactly. The landscape of how brands connect and influence us is just constantly evolving.
So as we kind of draw this exploration together, what are maybe one or two key things that really stand out for you from all this?
I think the sheer power of the subconscious, the non-rational factors like familiarity, color, even scarcity in shaping how we perceive brands is huge.
Yeah, things we don't consciously think about are doing a lot of the heavy lifting.
And definitely in our current digital age, the absolute centrality of trust. How quickly it can be lost, especially around privacy and data, and how hard it is to regain.
It really makes you look at the brands around you differently, doesn't it? We hope everyone listening thinks about how these psychological levers might be working on them.
Yeah, consider the brands you interact with daily. What stands out? What makes you trust them or distrust them? What other questions pop up?
And maybe a final thought to leave people with as we get better at understanding this brand psychology.
What are the ethical implications? How will it shape the future of marketing and how we, as consumers, navigate it all? Something to ponder.
Definitely food for thought. And for everyone who joined us for this discussion on Audiobook Quiver, we really hope you found it valuable.
Yes, thanks for tuning in.
If you enjoyed this look into brand psychology and want more engaging reviews and summaries to help you learn quickly and thoroughly, please do take a moment to like this video.
Subscribe to the channel too and hit that notification bell. That way you won't miss out on any of our future content.